The author of this novel, Liu Yi, was born in Dantu, Jiangsu, China in 1857. He had one elder brother and three sisters, and his family was one of the earliest to receive Western influence. Liu Yi was a precocious child who received the traditional Chinese literary training, but who also learned French and mathematics from Catholic priests, and wrote books on geometry, trigonometry, and medicine. Not much was known about his childhood, but later, he went to Shanghai as a physicist but failed. After that, he entered business, where he failed too. However, he gained experience in human affairs. In 1888, a flood of the Yellow River in Henan occurred, and as the officials were ignorant of river engineering, he offered his service, gaining recognition and an official title after this. Liu Yi continued working in the Yellow River, but not much time passed until another flood occurred in the Shandong. The governor Shang Yao asked for his advice. The governor already had advisors who proposed to widen the river banks, but Liu Yi opposed them, saying that the river banks should be deepened instead. However, his advice was not taken into consideration. Later, in 1894, upon the Sino-Japanese War, he pointed out the possibility of a surprise attack by the Japanese, and also was ignored, but later proved to have been correct. Later, he advocated for the construction of railways, for the government always declined his petitions. Then turning his energies into the opening of an iron mine, where he was successful. He also impulsed Western investments in the mine, but unfortunately received criticism and was illustrated as a traitor. After all these events, Liu Yi lost all faith in the government, so he decided to write The Travels of Lao Can, which is a satire of the Chinese government in the time of Liu Yi. The story begins with Lao Can in a deplorable state. Despite having studied history and poetry, Lao Can couldn't work as a teacher. Without family nor job, Lao Can was naturally cold and hungry, until a Taoist priest arrived to his town and acceded to teach him medicine. After having learned from the priest, Lao Can began to make a living curing people's diseases. Lao Can then started a journey across China. 20 years had passed until he arrived to Shandong, where there was a very rich man named Huang Rui, who every year in summer fell victim of a bad illness, but by late autumn was better again. This man asked Lao Can whether he could help him, and Lao Can said he wasn't sure, but would try. Lao Can was successful at curing this man, and so this one paid him in big amounts. One day, Lao Can was resting and his friends, learning and knowledge, invited him to go to the mountains. Once there, they had a very good view of the sea, and pointed out a boat in trouble. With a hand telescope, they had realized that the boat was sinking, and despite that, the captains directed to the open sea instead to the shore. Lao Can and his friends decided to reach the boat in small fishing boats to alert them. When they reached the boat, they saw how some leaders which seemed of good ideas emerged, but ended lying to people to take their money. And from one instant to another, the people and the captain started to attack Lao Can and his friends. And when they destroyed the fishing boats, Lao Can drowned. In that moment, Lao Can wakes up and continues his journey. He travels to different towns, assists to concerts where the singers had a voice that enchanted anyone who heard the melody, and helped people in need of medical assistance. He also was fond on hearing the stories locals had to tell, and realized that many stories were actual cases of injustice from some magistrates and official governors. Soon, his journey was joined with the political world when he talked to the magistrate Shen. Lao Can then realized that not every governor was bad, because Mr. Shen asked Lao Can for advice to rule without injustice, things that Lao Can accepted. After helping Mr. Shen, Lao Can continued his journey. Things passed, and he met Mr. Huang, a man with political charges. Lao Can establishes a long conversation with him, which was accompanied by two girls. As they continued talking, They got to know the history of the girls present there, learning that they had a rough past and now were miserable. Both men, moved by the stories, decide to help the girls. Finally, the men rescued the girls from being sold to a violent man and got married with them. In the book, we can appreciate the theme of individual perspective from Lao Can. This character demonstrates us how he doesn't care if the things he thinks are against the government and threatens his life, as we can see in the quote. "Did you write this, sir? What have you written? You will get into trouble. This is no joke. If you are not careful, you will lose your life and we shall be involved too. But don't be frightened. I have put my name under it. It doesn't concern you." The Travels of Lao Can, Chapter 6. This dialogue happens after Lao Can decides to write a poem criticizing the methods the magistrates use to reduce crime by incriminating innocent people. Also, we can appreciate the theme of impotence, when Old Dong tells Lao Can the history of how a wealthy family was incriminated of a theft and were not able to defend themselves. "What could they do?" retorted Old Dong. "When people are unjustly treated by the authorities, what can they do but endure it? If you report to a superior officer, according to law, he will send the case back to the district magistrate, and once it comes into his hands, there will be another man condemned." The Troubles of Lao Can, Chapter 4. And last but not least, what we mostly see during this novel is injustice. We can have a look at these aspects that characterize China the most in the time Liu Yi lived. In the novel, we can see a direct excerpt from a discussion about preventing the flood between some high officials and the governor of district Shang. "The trouble with this river is that it is too narrow. You will not have peace until it is made broader. You must pull down the people's dikes and keep to the main dikes." Thereupon, all the high officials approved, but the governor said, "How about the people between the dikes? We shall have to pay them to move their homes." But those coarse high officials said, "You must not let the people know. Consider the distance between the dikes is some 2 miles broad and 200 miles long, and thousands of families live there. If you let them know, those hundreds of thousands of men will defend their dikes and make it impossible to put them down." The governor could do nothing, so he nodded his head and sighed, and we heard that he even shed a few tears. The Troubles of Lao Can, Chapter 10. This meant that the decisions to prevent the flood were made without taking in account the thousands of families that would be affected. The governor Shang knew that, but all the high officials didn't care at all. So, to conclude, we could say that these themes are essentially what the author saw and felt about the government at his time. The reason he lost all hope in government, but standing with his integrity and honor defending his own perspective.